I received the call that would change everything exactly 21 days before Christmas. The harsh winter light filtered through my apartment blinds as my father delivered the blow. We decided on a no deadbeats policy this year, August. So we're only having your sister and her family for Christmas, my father said coldly. Maybe next year you'll have gotten your act together. The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me stunned. The phone still pressed against my ear as my father's sneering tone echoed in my mind. I slowly lowered my phone and looked around my modest one-bedroom apartment. Anyone who saw where I lived would probably agree with my father's assessment of me as a deadbeat. The furniture was secondhand, the carpet worn thin in places, and the kitchen appliances outdated. But appearances, as they say, can be deceiving. What my family didn't know was that this apartment was nothing but a front. 3 years ago, I'd decided to live well below my means while pouring everything into my business. And just last month, that decision had paid off spectacularly when I sold my security software company for $32 million. The paperwork for my new $8 million mountain lodge was sitting on my small dining table, waiting for the final signatures in January. I walked to the window and stared out at the city below. 10 years ago, I had dropped out of college during my junior year to pursue my dream of starting a tech company. My father, a third-generation banker who valued traditional success above all else, had never forgiven me for that decision. To him, I was the family disappointment, the cautionary tale he'd share at family gatherings. August threw away his future. He would tell relatives, while I sat silently at the dinner table. He could have had a respectable career like his sister Tracy. Tracy had followed in our father's footsteps, working her way up at the same bank where he was a senior vice president. She had done everything right according to his rule book. College, stable job, marriage to Jack, a fellow banker, and 2 picture-perfect children. I loved my sister, but I had always been cast as her foil, the failure to her success. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the table next to the lodge paperwork. I had been planning to tell my family about my success at Christmas this year. After years of their skepticism and disapproval, I had wanted to share my vindication in person, to see their faces when they realized I hadn't been wasting my life after all. Now that opportunity had been yanked away with a cold phone call and a cruel dismissal. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison, my girlfriend of 2 years. We had met when she became one of my company's earliest clients, long before anyone else saw its potential. "Did you call your parents about Christmas yet?" Her message read. I hesitated, then typed back. "They called me. I'm not invited. No deadbeats allowed this year." Her response came quickly. "What? Are you serious? That's horrible, August. I'm coming over." 30 minutes later, Madison was sitting across from me at my small table, her blue eyes filled with indignation as I explained what had happened. "I don't understand how they can still see you this way," she said, brushing a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "Even if they don't know about the company sale, they must know your business has been doing well for years now." I shook my head. They never bothered to ask. Dad made up his mind about me the day I dropped out, and nothing I've done since has changed that. He calls my business my little computer hobby whenever it comes up. Madison reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then maybe it's time to show them what your little computer hobby has accomplished. Why wait until January to close on the lodge? Do it now." "What difference would that make?" I asked. "You've been hiding your success, living in this apartment, driving that old car, all because you wanted them to value you for you, not your money. But they've proven they're not going to do that. So maybe it's time to show them what they've been dismissing all these years." I was considering her words when my phone pinged with a notification. It was a distant cousin tagging me in a comment on one of my father's social media posts. Curious, I opened it, and what I saw made my blood boil. It was a family Christmas announcement post, and buried in the comments was my father responding to someone asking if I would be there. August probably doesn't even have a permanent address these days. "We're tired of supporting him, so we're having a deadbeat-free holiday this year. Just Tracy and her family." I showed Madison the post, my hands shaking. "He's telling everyone I'm homeless, that they've been supporting me. I haven't taken a dime from them since college. even when I was sleeping on friends' couches and eating ramen for every meal. Madison's expression hardened as she read. That's it. This isn't just about him excluding you anymore. He's publicly humiliating you based on lies. She looked up at me, determination in her eyes. Call the lodge seller right now. Tell them you want to close immediately, whatever it costs to expedite things. I looked at the paperwork in front of me, then back at the cruel social media post. Something shifted inside me in that moment. My desire to earn my family's approval transformed into a resolution to stand up for my own truth. I picked up my phone and called my real estate agent. Hi, Patty. It's August. I want to close on the lodge before Christmas, not after. Whatever it takes. 1 week later, Madison and I stood in the great room of my newly acquired mountain lodge, staring out through floor-to-ceiling windows at the snow-covered peaks beyond. The panoramic view was even more breathtaking than the photos had suggested, with pine forests stretching into the distance and a frozen lake gleaming in the valley below. I still can't believe this is yours, Madison said, turning in a slow circle to take in the soaring timber ceilings, massive stone fireplace, and custom woodwork throughout the 6,000-square-foot main house. Ours, I corrected her with a smile. The lodge had 6 bedrooms in the main house, plus 3 guest cabins on the property, each with 2 bedrooms of their own. 12 bedrooms total, enough to host a substantial family gathering. As we explored the gourmet kitchen with its commercial-grade appliances and the dining room that could seat 20, an idea began to form in my mind. You know, I said slowly, this would be the perfect place for a Christmas gathering. Madison looked at me, her expression thoughtful. You mean, host your own Christmas here instead of going to your parents'? Well, technically you can't go to your parents anyway since they uninvited you. I nodded, the plan crystallizing as I spoke. Not just any Christmas gathering. The ultimate family Christmas. The kind my parents could never host in their 3-bedroom colonial. I pulled out my phone and called my mother, putting it on speaker so Madison could hear. August? This is a surprise, my mother said when she answered. Her tone was guarded but not unfriendly. She had always been caught in the middle between my father and me. Never directly cruel but never standing up to him either. Hey Mom, quick question. Which relatives turned down your Christmas invitation this year? I know you and Dad usually invite everyone. She hesitated before answering. Well, your Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jim are going to his family this year. And Uncle Steve and Aunt Laura said their house is too far to drive. Your cousins Ben and Alicia are doing their own thing with friends. Your father's brother Ted said something came up last minute. Why do you ask? Just curious. Are Grandma and Grandpa coming? No. They said the house gets too crowded with Tracy's kids running around. They're staying home this year. She paused. August. About Christmas. Your father didn't mean. I cut her off politely. It's fine, Mom. I understand. Look, I've got to run. Talk soon. I hung up before she could say anything else. Madison was watching me with a raised eyebrow. You're going to invite all the relatives who turned down your parents, aren't you? A slow smile spread across my face. Plus Tracy and her family. But not my parents. That's devious. I love it. For the next few hours, we planned what would become the most elaborate Christmas gathering either of us had ever conceived. I called a luxury event planner in the nearest town and arranged for top-tier catering, professional decorators, to transform the lodge into a winter wonderland, and a personal shopper to help select thoughtful gifts for every guest. Madison designed elegant invitations on her laptop. Christmas at August's Mountain Lodge, embossed in gold on heavy cream cardstock, with a professional photograph of the lodge's exterior. The invitations clearly stated that I was the sole owner and host, in case anyone doubted the legitimacy of the invitation. Should we mention that your parents won't be there? Madison asked as she finalized the design. I thought about it for a moment. No need. They'll figure it out when they see who else is invited. We sent the invitations by overnight delivery to every relative who had declined my parents' invitation, plus a special one to Tracy and her family. I called Tracy later that evening to make sure she would receive it before my parents found out. Tracy Williams. My sister answered in her professional banker voice. Hey sis, it's August. August, Dad told me you weren't coming for Christmas this year. Is everything okay? The concern in her voice seemed genuine, which made what my father had done even worse. Had he told her I declined the invitation, rather than admitting he had uninvited me? Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. Listen, you're going to receive something in the mail tomorrow, and I wanted to talk to you about it first. Okay, she said, sounding confused. I just bought a mountain lodge, and I'm hosting Christmas there this year. I'd love for you, Jack, and the kids to come. There was silence on the other end of the line. Tracy, you bought a mountain lodge? She finally asked, disbelief evident in her tone. Yes. My business has been doing very well. Another pause. But, Dad said, I know what Dad's been saying about me. I saw his social media comments. I tried to keep the bitterness out of my voice. It's not true, Tracy. I haven't taken money from him or anyone in the family in years. In fact, my security software company was just acquired for $32 million. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Oh my God, August. That's incredible. Why didn't you tell any of us? I was planning to announce it at Christmas. Then Dad uninvited me. He what? He told me you couldn't make it because you were too busy. I should have known he was lying. The pain in her voice made me regret how I'd approached the conversation. I'm sorry to put you in this position, Tracy. I don't want to create problems between you and Dad. I just wanted to invite you to my Christmas gathering. You don't have to come. No, I want to come, she said firmly. We'll be there. But August, there's something you should know. What is it? Tracy's voice dropped to a whisper, as though she was worried about being overheard. Jack's bank is downsizing. He's being let go after the new year. We haven't told Mom and Dad yet because, well, you know how Dad is. I'm afraid once he finds out, we'll be the next ones cut from the family Christmas list. The revelation stunned me. My perfect sister's family was facing financial trouble, and she was afraid of our father's reaction. His no deadbeats policy apparently extended beyond me to anyone he perceived as failing. I'm so sorry about Jack's job, I said. And I'm sorry Dad has you walking on eggshells like that. No one should live in fear of conditional family acceptance. It's always been this way, hasn't it? You were just the only one brave enough to defy him. There was a new respect in Tracy's voice that had never been there before. Come to the lodge for Christmas, I said gently. Bring the family. We'll talk about Jack's situation then. I might have some opportunities that would interest him. Thank you, August. We'll be there. She paused. What about Mom and Dad? They're not invited. She didn't argue, which told me everything I needed to know about how their treatment of me had affected her too. After hanging up, I shared Tracy's situation with Madison. So your father's perfect banker son-in-law is about to lose his job, Madison mused. And they haven't told your father because they're afraid of his reaction. That's sad, August. No one should be afraid to tell family about hardships. I nodded, feeling a new dimension added to my Christmas plan. This wasn't just about proving my success anymore. It was about creating the kind of accepting family environment that my father never provided. This Christmas is going to change everything, I said, looking out at the mountains as the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of gold and pink, for all of us. 2 weeks before Christmas, I was at the lodge supervising the delivery of the massive 20-foot Fraser fir that would serve as our main Christmas tree. The decorators had already transformed the great room with garlands, wreaths, and thousands of twinkling lights, but the tree was going to be the centerpiece of it all. My phone rang as the delivery team was setting up the tree stand. It was my father, and he was furious. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded without preamble. "Hello to you too, Dad," I replied calmly, stepping outside onto the deck for privacy. "Don't play games with me. I just got a call from your Uncle Steve saying he can't come to our Christmas because he's going to some event you're hosting. What kind of scam are you running?" I took a deep breath, looking out at the snow-covered landscape for strength. "It's not a scam, Dad. I purchased a mountain lodge, and I'm hosting Christmas here this year. You're welcome to come see it for yourself." He scoffed. "A mountain lodge? You expect me to believe that? Whose place are you borrowing to impress people and make your mother and me look bad?" The accusation stung, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not borrowing anything. The lodge is mine. I sold my company for $32 million last month. Bull, he spat. If you're so successful, why are you living in that dump apartment? Why are you driving a car that's 10 years old? You're lying to save face, and you're using my relatives to do it. I lived frugally because I was reinvesting in my business. That paid off. I'm not lying, and I'm not trying to make you look bad. I just wanted to host Christmas for the family. Send me proof, he demanded. Send me proof right now that you own this so-called lodge. I ended the call, took several photos of myself holding the deed in front of the lodge, and texted them to him. His response came back almost immediately. Anyone can fake photos these days. This is pathetic, August. When your little charade falls apart, don't come crying to us. I stared at the message, a complex mix of emotions churning inside me. Even faced with evidence, he refused to believe in my success. Part of me had still hoped that proof of my achievements would finally win his approval. That hope now seemed foolish. Madison found me still standing on the deck, despite the cold. "Everything okay?" she asked, wrapping her arms around me from behind. My father called. Uncle Steve told him about the invitation. She tightened her embrace. "And he still doesn't believe you're successful? He thinks I'm running a scam, borrowing someone's property to make him look bad." I turned to face her. What kind of father assumes the worst about his son even when presented with evidence to the contrary? Madison's expression was sympathetic but firm. The kind you can't please, no matter what you do. "August, you need to accept that his approval might never come, no matter how successful you become." I knew she was right, but years of seeking my father's approval were hard to overcome. "I know. Let's focus on making this the best Christmas our family has ever had. For everyone, except him." Back inside, my phone was buzzing constantly with RSVPs from excited relatives. Everyone I had invited was coming, many expressing surprise and delight at the invitation. Several mentioned they had been avoiding my parents' Christmas, due to the increasingly judgmental atmosphere my father created. Cousin Ben called personally rather than just responding to the invitation. "August, I've got to say, this is a surprise. We all thought you were, well, a broke failure." I supplied. "I mean, your dad always made it sound like you were struggling. Said you'd hit him up for money regularly." I nearly dropped the phone. "What? I never asked him for money after college. Not once." Ben sounded uncomfortable. "Look, man, I'm just telling you what he told us. Said you'd call him crying every few months about needing rent money or whatever. Made it sound like you were barely getting by." The revelation that my father had been actively lying about me to the extended family for years made my chest tight with anger. "Ben, I swear to you that never happened. I've been building my company for years, living below my means to reinvest. I just sold it for $32 million. Now it was Ben's turn to be shocked. "Holy shit, August. That's incredible. But why would your dad lie about you like that?" "I wish I knew," I said honestly. Maybe it was easier than admitting I chose a different path than the one he wanted for me and succeeded anyway. After talking with Ben, I received similar calls from other relatives who had been fed the same narrative by my father. Each conversation reinforced my determination to set the record straight at Christmas, not out of vengeance, but because the truth deserved to be known. A week before Christmas, Tracy called with startling news. "August, you won't believe what's happening. Mom and Dad are trying to salvage their Christmas gathering. They're calling everyone who RSVP'd to your event and offering to pay for their flights if they'll come to their house instead." I was genuinely surprised. "They're trying to bribe people to choose their Christmas over mine?" "Yes, and it's backfiring spectacularly. Uncle Steve told them he wouldn't miss your Mountain Lodge Christmas for anything, especially after they'd been dismissing you as a failure for years. Grandma told them she was ashamed of how they've treated you. It's getting ugly." The news should have felt like a victory, but instead, it filled me with a complicated sadness. My father was so determined to maintain his narrative about me that he was willing to bribe family members rather than acknowledge my success. "I'm sorry if this is causing problems for you," I told Tracy. "Don't be," she said firmly. "This has been a long time coming. Dad can't control everyone with his judgments anymore." The conversation with Tracy left me thoughtful. What had started as a simple desire to prove myself to my family had evolved into something much larger, exposing long-standing dynamics that had affected more than just me. As Christmas approached, I realized this gathering might be about healing for our entire extended family, not just validating my own success. 1 week before Christmas, Madison and I were sitting in front of the massive stone fireplace at the lodge, watching snow fall gently outside the windows. Most of the preparations were complete, with just a few finishing touches left for the catering and decoration teams. "You've been quiet tonight," Madison observed, sipping her wine. "What are you thinking about?" I swirled my own glass, watching the light play through the ruby liquid. Everything that's happened. How my family saw me all these years, versus what was really going on. She set down her glass and curled her legs underneath her on the sofa. "You've never actually told me the whole story, you know. I came in during the successful part. What were those failure years really like?" I hadn't shared the full truth with anyone. It felt too vulnerable, too raw. But sitting there in the warmth of the fire, with the woman I loved beside me and the tangible proof of my success surrounding us, I decided it was time. "It was hard," I began. "Really hard. Those years when my family thought I was failing, I was actually working 18-hour days. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with a mattress on the floor and a card table for a desk. I ate ramen noodles for weeks straight because that's all I could afford after paying for server costs and development tools." Madison listened intently as I continued. "There was a winter when my car broke down, and I couldn't afford to fix it. I walked 2 miles in snow and ice to investor meetings because I couldn't even afford the bus most days. I'd show up with my shoes soaked through, trying to look professional while my feet were numb from cold. "Why didn't you ask your family for help?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath. I did. Once. That's the thing my father never told anyone when he was spreading lies about me, constantly begging for money. I stared into the fire, the memory still painful after all these years. 6 years ago, I was close to a breakthrough with the security algorithm. I needed $5,000 to secure a patent that would protect the core technology. Without it, all my work could have been copied by competitors. I'd emptied my savings, maxed out my credit cards, and borrowed from every friend willing to help. I was still short. Madison placed her hand over mine as I continued. I called my father and asked if I could have dinner with him and Mom to discuss something important. He invited me over, and I explained the situation, how the patent would protect years of work, how the technology was promising. I showed him the preliminary interest from potential clients. I closed my eyes, the humiliation still fresh. He listened to my whole presentation, then asked me to explain it again during dinner, where Tracy and Jack were also present. I thought he was genuinely interested. Instead, he used it as an opportunity to humiliate me in front of everyone. "What did he do?" Madison asked softly. He stood up at the dinner table and announced, "My son is here begging for a handout again. $5,000 to protect his little computer program that no one will ever want to buy. He told everyone I was a drain on society, that I'd never amount to anything, that I should give up and get a real job, like my sister." I opened my eyes, the pain of that night still sharp. I walked out and didn't speak to any of them for months. I drastically reduced contact after that, calling Mom occasionally but avoiding any family gatherings where he'd be present. Madison's eyes were shining with unshed tears. "How did you get the patent without his help?" "I sold the only thing of value I owned. My grandfather left me his vintage comic book collection when he died. It was my most treasured possession, not just for its monetary value, but because he and I had bonded over those comics when I was a kid. He was the only one in the family who ever really believed in me." I took a shaky breath. "I sold the entire collection to a collector for $6,000. It was worth far more, but I was desperate and took the first offer. That patent ended up being the cornerstone of my company's value when I sold it." Madison wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "Your father doesn't know any of this, does he?" I shook my head. "No one does. Not even Tracy. They just saw me disappear from family functions and assumed I was too ashamed of my failure to show my face." We sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling and snow continuing to fall outside. You know what? Madison said suddenly, sitting up straighter. We should invite Perry to Christmas. Perry Williams had been my angel investor, the first person with significant resources to believe in my vision. He had provided the funding that allowed me to expand beyond a one-person operation and start building a real company. That's actually a great idea, I said, warming to the concept. He was the one who believed in me when my own family wouldn't. Madison's eyes lit up with another thought. What about Jake? Could we track him down? Jake had been my roommate in college, the only person who had supported my decision to drop out and pursue my tech dreams. He had even let me sleep on his couch during my hardest times. We had lost touch over the years as I became consumed with work, and he moved overseas for a job. I don't even know if he's in the country, I said doubtfully, but Perry might know how to reach him. They met at that conference 3 years ago, remember? I nodded slowly. It's worth a try. I called Perry that evening, and he was delighted by the invitation, immediately accepting. When I mentioned Jake, he confirmed that they had kept in loose contact over the years. Last I heard, he was working for a tech firm in Berlin, Perry said. But I think he's due for a vacation. Let me see what I can do. To my amazement, Perry called back the next morning with news that he had not only reached Jake, but had offered to fly him in as his Christmas gift to both of us. Jake, who had apparently been following my company's progress from afar and was thrilled about its successful sale, had immediately accepted. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of rightness settling over me. The people who had genuinely supported me during my darkest times would be present to witness the fruits of that faith. The contrast with my father's treatment couldn't be clearer, and yet I found myself hoping that somehow this Christmas might offer a path to healing even that most wounded of relationships. Tracy and her family were the first to arrive on Christmas Eve morning. Her husband Jack looked stressed, with dark circles under his eyes, while their children Emma, age 10, and Jack Jr., age 8, bounded out of the car with typical kid excitement about Christmas. Tracy hugged me tightly when I greeted them at the door. "This place is unbelievable, August," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you." Those simple words from my sister affected me more deeply than I had expected. After years of being compared unfavorably to her, hearing her express pride in me felt like the closing of an old wound. I showed them to their rooms, a family suite with connected bedrooms that delighted the kids with its rustic luxury. While the children explored with Madison, Tracy pulled me aside on the balcony, overlooking the great room. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice low. "Jack's situation is worse than I let on. The bank isn't just letting him go. They're investigating his entire department for mismanagement. He didn't do anything wrong, but his boss was cutting corners. We might lose the house after the holidays." I glanced through the glass doors at Jack, who was staring out the window with a defeated posture I recognized all too well from my own struggles. "I'm sorry, Tracy. That's terrible." She wrapped her arms around herself, looking smaller than the confident banker I was used to seeing. "We've been living beyond our means for years, trying to meet Dad's expectations. The country club membership, private schools for the kids, the house in the right neighborhood, all to prove we were successful enough to earn his approval. The parallels between her experience and mine were striking, though we had chosen opposite paths. "I have a proposition for Jack," I said. "I'm starting a new venture after the new year, a consulting firm focused on security implementations for financial institutions. I could use someone with his banking background." Hope flared in Tracy's eyes. "Are you serious? You'd hire him?" "I'd be lucky to have him. But I want to be clear. This isn't charity. I legitimately need someone with his expertise. The position would require relocating here, though. I'm making this my home base." She hugged me impulsively. "Thank you, August. Just thank you." Throughout the day, other guests arrived. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins all exclaimed over the lodge and expressed amazement at my transformation from the family failure to successful host. Many apologized for believing my father's characterization of me, which I accepted graciously, understanding they had had no reason to doubt him. Perry arrived in the afternoon with Jake, whose familiar grin brought back memories of late-night coding sessions and dreams of changing the world through technology. Our reunion was emotional, filled with backslaps, And remember whens that made me realize how much I had missed his friendship during my years of single-minded focus on building my company. By evening, the lodge was filled with laughter, conversation, and the delicious smells of the catered Christmas Eve dinner being prepared in the kitchen. The massive tree sparkled with lights and custom ornaments I had ordered for each guest with their names and the year, a tradition I planned to continue in future gatherings. I was in the kitchen discussing last-minute details with the catering manager when Madison found me, her expression concerned. "Your parents just pulled up," she said quietly. I froze. "What?" "They weren't invited. Tracy says your mother has been calling her all week, devastated about the family rift. Apparently they discovered the gathering was real after everyone canceled on them." Before I could process this information, my mother appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking nervous but smiling tentatively. My father stood behind her, his face unreadable. "August," my mother said, stepping forward to embrace me. I returned the hug automatically, still processing their unexpected arrival. "The lodge is beautiful. We had no idea." My father stepped forward, extending his hand with a stiff smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Quite an impressive place, son." The formal gesture and forced pleasantness after years of dismissal and recent public humiliation made something twist uncomfortably in my chest. But with 20 guests in the next room, I shook his hand and managed a civil thank you. "We brought our overnight bags," my mother continued brightly, as though this were a planned visit. "Tracy mentioned there might be room for us to stay?" Madison and I exchanged glances. There were indeed 2 unused bedrooms in one of the guest cabins, as 2 cousins had decided to share space. The question was whether I wanted my parents to stay. Madison gave a slight nod, and I made my decision. "Of course. Madison can show you where to put your things before dinner." As Madison led my parents away, I took a moment to collect myself. I had planned this event partly to prove my father wrong, but I hadn't anticipated having to face him directly during it. Now I would have to navigate the evening with him present, watching his reactions as he was confronted with the reality of my success. Dinner was served in the grand dining room, with all 24 of us seated around the long table, adorned with evergreen garlands, candles, and fine china. The caterers had outdone themselves with a traditional feast of prime rib, roasted vegetables, and all the classic holiday sides. My father, seated halfway down the table, maintained his facade of pleasant approval throughout the meal, occasionally making comments about always believing in August's potential that made Tracy shoot me warning glances. The true test came during dessert, when Perry, somewhat loosened by wine, and unaware of the family dynamics, raised his glass for a toast. "To August," he said, standing. "One of the most dedicated and brilliant entrepreneurs I've had the pleasure to invest in. When you showed me that security algorithm 6 years ago, I knew you were going to change the industry. Best investment decision I ever made." My father's smile became fixed as Perry continued. "In fact," Perry said, turning to my father with innocent goodwill, "I should thank you, Mr. Williams, for passing on the opportunity to invest in your son's company. Your loss was definitely my gain." To August and his $32 million success story. The table erupted in cheers and glass clinking, but I kept my eyes on my father. His face had gone pale, then flushed dark red. He mechanically raised his glass and took a sip, but the pleasant mask had cracked, revealing the anger beneath. After dessert, the gathering moved to the great room for coffee and conversation. I was catching up with Jake by the fireplace when I noticed my father standing alone on the periphery of the party, watching me with an intensity that made me uneasy. I excused myself from Jake and approached my father, thinking perhaps we could finally have an honest conversation. Before I could speak, he grabbed my arm and pulled me into the nearby study, closing the door behind us. "What's your game here, August?" he demanded, dropping all pretense of support. "All this," he gestured around at the lodge, "just to humiliate me in front of the family?" I took a step back, genuinely surprised by his interpretation. "This isn't about you, Dad. I bought this place for myself, because I wanted it. I hosted Christmas because I wanted to spend the holiday with family. Then why exclude your mother and me from the invitations? Why invite my brother, my parents, everyone but us?" "Because you uninvited me from your Christmas first," I said, keeping my voice steady. You called me a deadbeat and publicly humiliated me on social media. You've been telling the family for years that I've been begging you for money, which never happened." He scoffed. "So this is revenge. Showing off your newfound wealth to prove me wrong." "No. It's about finally standing up for myself and my accomplishments, which you've consistently dismissed and denigrated." My father's face twisted with an emotion I couldn't quite identify. "You think buying a big house and throwing money around makes you successful? Real success is building something that lasts, something respectable, something that follows tradition, not some flash-in-the-pan tech scheme that could collapse tomorrow." I stared at him, finally understanding that no amount of conventional success would ever be enough. His definition was so narrow that even $32 million couldn't widen it. "I built something from nothing, Dad. I created a product that helps people, that solves real problems. I employed dozens of people and provided them with good jobs. If that's not success by your definition, then I don't need your definition anymore." He stepped closer, his voice rising. "You've always been selfish, August. Always thinking you know better than everyone else. Now you've turned the family against me with your showing off. You'll always be a disappointment to me, no matter how much money you have." The door opened before I could respond, and we both turned to see my mother standing there, her face white with shock. Behind her stood several family members, including Tracy and my grandparents, all wearing expressions that made it clear they had heard my father's last statement. My mother began to cry, turning and pushing past the gathered family. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by my father storming out of the room, brushing roughly past everyone. I remained standing in the study, feeling strangely calm despite the public confrontation. My father had finally spoken his truth aloud for everyone to hear, and in doing so, had freed me from any lingering hope of earning his approval. Madison appeared at my side, taking my hand in silent support, as my relatives murmured uncomfortably and began dispersing back to the main gathering. Tracy remained, her expression a mix of sympathy and resignation. "I'm so sorry, August. I thought if they came, maybe." "It's not your fault," I assured her. "Maybe it was better this way. Now everyone knows where they stand." As we rejoined the party, I noticed that despite the awkwardness of the confrontation, there was also a sense of relief among many family members, as though a long-maintained tension had finally been released. My father's true nature had been revealed, not by anything I had said or done, but by his own words and actions. After the dramatic confrontation, most guests retreated to their rooms, leaving me alone by the great room fireplace, staring into the flames and processing the evening's events. The massive Christmas tree glowed softly in the corner, packages piled beneath it for the morning's celebration. "Mind if I join you?" a voice asked. I looked up to see Jake, carrying 2 glasses of bourbon. "Please," I said, gesturing to the chair across from mine. He handed me one of the glasses and settled in. Just like old times. You, me, and a crisis to analyze. I smiled despite myself. During college and the early startup days, Jake had been my sounding board, the person I turned to when problems seemed insurmountable. We'd spend hours strategizing solutions, often late into the night. "Except now the crisis comes with much better alcohol," I said, raising my glass in a small toast before taking a sip. "Your dad was always a piece of work," Jake remarked. "I remember when he came to visit sophomore year and spent the entire time comparing your computer science grades to your sister's business school performance." I nodded. He never understood that I was teaching myself programming languages that weren't even in the curriculum yet. The grades didn't reflect what I was learning. "You always saw beyond the immediate path," Jake said. "It's what made you successful." That, and being the most stubborn person I've ever met. We fell into reminiscing about the early days, the all-nighters coding, the first small successes, the crushing disappointments. Jake filled me in on his life in Berlin, his work for a European tech firm, and his recent engagement to a German architect named Hannah. "You should bring her to visit," I said. "The lodge has plenty of room for guests. I might take you up on that. Hannah would love this place." He looked around appreciatively at the timber frame construction and mountain views, visible even in the darkness through the massive windows. We talked until the fire burned low, and I felt the reconnection with my oldest friend healing something that had been missing during my years of isolation and focus. When we finally said goodnight, I realized it was after 2 in the morning, Christmas morning. I woke early despite the late night, excited about the day ahead. Madison was already up, checking on the preparations for Christmas brunch. My parents had not emerged from their cabin, but everyone else was beginning to gather in the great room, drawn by the smell of coffee and the anticipation of the holiday. The children, Emma and Jack Jr., were already inspecting the packages under the tree, trying to guess their contents. I had worked with a personal shopper to select thoughtful gifts for every guest, with special attention to the kids. Snow was falling lightly outside, adding to the perfect Christmas card scene. By the time brunch was served, everyone except my parents had assembled in the dining room. The spread was magnificent, with everything from eggs Benedict to fresh pastries, fruit platters, and a build-your-own waffle station that delighted the children. Just as we were finishing the meal, my parents appeared, looking uncomfortable but present. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed from crying, while my father maintained a stiff, formal demeanor. "Merry Christmas," my mother said quietly, accepting a cup of coffee from Madison. The gift exchange was scheduled to follow brunch. I had arranged all the presents under the tree, with personalized stockings hung along the massive stone fireplace for each guest. For my parents, despite everything, I had chosen a first-class European vacation package, the trip they had always talked about, but never taken because of my father's reluctance to spend the money. For Tracy's family, I had selected individual gifts tailored to each member's interests, plus a special envelope containing my offer to Jack for a position in my new venture, complete with a generous relocation package and salary that would ease their financial worries. As we gathered around the tree, Tracy unexpectedly stood and asked for everyone's attention. "Before we start opening gifts, there's something I need to say." She looked nervous, but determined, her gaze moving from me to our father and back. "This is about August, and something none of you know." I frowned, confused about what Tracy might reveal. 3 years ago, my son Jack Jr. needed emergency surgery for a congenital heart defect that suddenly became life-threatening. Our insurance refused to cover the experimental procedure he needed, calling it elective, despite our doctors insisting it was necessary. Jack Jr. squirmed uncomfortably as attention turned to him, and his father put a protective arm around his shoulders. Tracy continued, "We were facing a $175,000 medical bill with no way to pay it. We were desperate, considering selling our house, taking out loans we could never repay." She took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. Then, mysteriously, the hospital informed us that an anonymous donor had paid the entire bill. For 3 years, we had no idea who had helped us in our darkest hour. Tracy looked directly at me now. "Last month, a hospital administrator accidentally let something slip when I was handling some follow-up paperwork. The anonymous donor was August." A murmur went through the gathering as all eyes turned to me. I shifted uncomfortably, having never intended for this information to become public. August paid for Jack Jr.'s surgery, at a time when, according to what Dad had told us, he was struggling himself. He never told any of us. He never asked for recognition or thanks. He just quietly saved my son's life and went on with his own struggles. Tears were streaming down Tracy's face now. I confronted him about it last night, and he confirmed it was true. What August didn't tell me, what I learned from his friend Perry this morning, was that he sold his company's first major server system to afford it. He delayed his own business growth by months to help us, without anyone knowing. I hadn't known Perry was aware of that sacrifice. The timing of the medical bill and my first major sale had indeed forced me to make a difficult choice, but I had never regretted it. Jack Jr. was family. My mother was openly crying now, and even my father looked shaken. The revelation created a palpable shift in the room's atmosphere, a deepening of the already growing recognition that the family narrative about me had been fundamentally wrong. As Tracy sat down, Madison squeezed my hand supportively. The gift exchange began, filling the room with exclamations of delight and appreciation. Each gift had been carefully chosen to reflect the recipient's interests and needs, from my grandfather's new fishing equipment to my young cousin's educational tablets. When my father opened the envelope containing the European vacation details, he stared at it in silence for a long moment. My mother, reading over his shoulder, gasped softly. August, this is too generous, she began. You've always wanted to see Europe, I said simply. Now you can. First class all the way, with private guides in each city. My father looked up, his expression unreadable. Thank you, he said stiffly. It wasn't much, but it was something. After the main gift exchange, I pulled Tracy and Jack aside to give them the envelope with my job offer. Jack read it with widening eyes. Are you serious? He asked, looking up at me. Chief Compliance Officer? This salary is twice what I was making at the bank. I need someone with banking experience for this role, I explained. You're perfect for it. And selfishly, I'd like to have family nearby. Tracy embraced me tearfully, while Jack continued to stare at the offer letter in disbelief. Their relief was palpable, and I felt a deep satisfaction in being able to help them after they had been caught in the same toxic family dynamic that had affected me for so long. As the day progressed, I noticed my father standing alone on the deck, looking out at the snow-covered mountains. After a moment's hesitation, I decided to join him, hoping that Tracy's revelation might have created an opening for reconciliation. I stepped out onto the deck, the cold mountain air sharp in my lungs. My father didn't turn as I approached, continuing to gaze at the majestic view spread before us. Dad, I said simply, coming to stand beside him at the railing. He was silent for a long moment, then spoke without looking at me. Your sister told me about her son's surgery, about what you did. I nodded, though he wasn't watching me. He's family. It was the right thing to do. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why let me continue thinking, saying those things about you? The question surprised me. It was more self-aware than anything I'd ever heard from my father. Would it have mattered? I asked honestly. Would knowing I paid for Jack Jr.'s surgery have changed your opinion of my life choices? He finally turned to look at me, and I was shocked to see vulnerability in his expression. My father, always so certain, so immovable, looked lost. I don't know, he admitted. I've been so set in my thinking for so long. We stood in silence for a moment, watching a hawk circle lazily over the valley below. I need to tell you something, my father said finally, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Something I've never told anyone, not even your mother. I waited, curious despite myself. When I was your age, a little younger actually, I had a chance to start a business with a college friend, a construction company. We had a solid plan, some interested investors. He paused, his gaze distant. My father, your grandfather, told me it was foolish, that I should take the safe route, work my way up at the bank like he did. This was family history I'd never heard before. What happened? I listened to him. I took the bank job. My friend went ahead with the company anyway, found another partner. My father's hands tightened on the railing. That company became Williams Construction. They build skyscrapers now. The irony wasn't lost on me. Williams Construction was a major regional firm, one that had built several of the prominent buildings in our city's skyline. My entire career, I've played it safe, done what was expected, worked my way up slowly, while watching my former friend become wealthy, doing what I was afraid to try. He turned to me, his eyes clear and direct for perhaps the first time in our relationship. When you dropped out to start your company, it was like seeing my own road not taken. Every time you struggled, every setback you faced, it justified my choice to play it safe, and every success you had reminded you of what might have been. I finished for him. He nodded. It was easier to believe you would fail than to acknowledge you might succeed where I hadn't dared to try. He looked away, his voice dropping. I'm not proud of that, August. Seeing all this, he gestured at the lodge, seeing what you've built, what you sacrificed for Tracy's son while telling no one. It's forced me to face some uncomfortable truths about myself. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more honesty than I had ever expected from my father. I felt something shift between us. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. I don't know if I can change, he continued. 60 years of being a certain way, but I want you to know that I see now what I've done. To you, to our relationship. That's a start, I said quietly. We remained on the deck a while longer, talking more openly than we ever had before. The conversation wasn't easy, and decades of hurt couldn't be erased in a single morning, but it was a beginning. When we returned inside, the lodge was filled with the sounds of family enjoying Christmas together. Children playing with new toys, adults chatting in small groups, the fire crackling in the hearth. Madison caught my eye from across the room, raising an eyebrow in silent question. I gave her a small nod, and her smile warmed me more than the fire ever could. After lunch, I asked for everyone's attention, standing before the fireplace with Madison at my side. "I want to thank all of you for coming today," I began. "Having family together like this means more to me than I can express." I looked around at the gathered faces, from my youngest cousins to my grandparents, each person representing a connection that had been strained or severed during my years of estrangement, but was now being renewed. The past decade has taught me many lessons. That success isn't measured by money but by integrity and how you treat others. That families should support each other unconditionally. And that sometimes you have to forge your own path, even when others don't understand it. Madison squeezed my hand encouragingly as I continued. "Today, I want to share some news and make an announcement. First, the news. Madison has agreed to marry me." Cheers and congratulations erupted, momentarily interrupting my speech. "We're planning a summer wedding right here at the lodge." Once the excitement died down, I moved to the more serious part of my announcement. I'm also establishing a family foundation with $5 million from the sale of my company. The Williams Family Future Fund will help family members pursue education or entrepreneurial dreams, ensuring no one has to choose between their passions and financial stability. I glanced at my father, whose expression was thoughtful rather than dismissive. "Progress. The first recipients will be my niece and nephew, with fully funded college accounts, and my brother-in-law Jack, who will receive both a position in my new company and startup capital for a business idea of his own he's been developing." Jack looked shocked again, as this was beyond the job offer I had already extended to him. "This lodge will be our family gathering place for all holidays going forward," I concluded. "A place of unconditional welcome for everyone, regardless of their career path, bank account balance, or life choices. A new tradition based on acceptance rather than judgment." As family members came up to congratulate Madison and me on our engagement and thank me for the foundation announcement, I saw my mother approach Tracy, the two of them embracing tearfully. My father stood nearby, looking somewhat lost, but making an effort to engage with his brother in what appeared to be a conciliatory conversation. The rest of the day passed in a blur of good food, laughter, and connection. By evening, as guests began to retire to their rooms, exhausted but happy from the day's celebrations, Madison and I found ourselves once again by the fire, reflecting on everything that had transpired. "You did it," she said, curling against my side. "You changed everything." "Not everything," I replied. "My father and I still have a long way to go, but for the first time, I feel like there's a path forward." And the foundation was a beautiful idea, using your success to make sure no one else in your family has to struggle like you did. I gazed into the fire, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this point. I realized something important through all this. Building my own success wasn't just about proving my father wrong. It was about creating the freedom to do things differently, to build something better than what I had. Madison nodded against my shoulder. "Sometimes the best response to being excluded is to create something more inclusive." Exactly. The money, the lodge, none of it would mean anything if it was just about revenge. But using it to bring family together, to support dreams, to heal old wounds, that gives it purpose. From the hallway came the sound of laughter as Jake and Perry exchanged stories with my cousins. From upstairs, the muffled excitement of children not quite ready for sleep, despite the long day. Throughout the lodge, the warmth of family connecting and reconnecting, bridging divides that had seemed unbridgeable just days before. As Madison and I watched the fire slowly die down to embers, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey from rejected deadbeat to the person who brought the family together had been painful and long, but in that moment, I wouldn't have changed any of it. Every struggle had led to this new beginning, not just for me, but for all of us. The Christmas that began with exclusion had transformed into something far more meaningful than I could have imagined. Not just a vindication of my success, but the foundation of a new family legacy built on acceptance, support, and unconditional love. Have you ever had to prove someone wrong who doubted you? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that success is the best response to those who doubt you. Thank you for joining me for this Christmas tale, and I wish you all holidays filled with acceptance and love.